back to Rugged Mountain Homestead. If you're new here, my name is Sarah, and today I am doing some preserving in the kitchen. I'm going to be preserving the delicata squash that was in my last Azure haul. I did go ahead and I have processed the butternut squash, so this will be the last of the winter squash. I'm going to be pressure canning this squash, and it is low acid vegetable, so it needs to be done in the pressure canner. This is my first time doing winter squash, so I thought you'd like to pull up a chair, grab a drink, and we can get this done together. I have this little binder here. It's actually the manual for my pressure canner, and Dean put it in this little binder so it stayed nice. And I'm going to be using the recipe that's in here. I'm just going to be doing one thing differently. And it says in here to boil your squash 2 minutes in water after cutting into 1-inch slices and peeling. However, if you've ever tried to peel winter squash, you will know that's a job in itself. And I would not even want to attempt to peel a winter squash unless it was roasted. So needless to say, I did not boil the winter squash. I roasted it, but not for the usual amount of time. Usually when I'm roasting squash, it's so that I can get a puree. So I roasted it, but then for a shorter amount of time so that I could get the peel off nice and easy. Once it roasts, I just stick my knife in there after making a slit, and it just kind of peels back. Now when you roast your squash, or how I like to do it, is I take a sheet pan, I put a piece of parchment paper down, and I cut the squash lengthwise. I take a spoon, scoop out all the innards, and then I take some oil, just enough to kind of coat the inside of the squash, the ends, and the outside. I do cut off the top and bottom end. Then I just lay them face down on the sheet pan, and then I will put them in a 425-degree oven and roast them until they're of the texture that I want. So here is my roasted squash peeled, and it should still be firm enough to slice. It's no longer hot. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this sliced up, and then we'll put it into jars. Okay, now my guidelines told me to use hot mason jars, so what I did is I went ahead and filled up my canner with water, and I've just got them on a really low setting. So I wouldn't think that these jars are like really hot, but they're very warm. And the reason I did it this way is because my squash is no longer piping hot. Now with the jars in the hot water, I also dropped in my lids and rings. So I'm going to use this handy dandy little gadget to get them out. And basically, it's just a stick with a magnet in it. Whether you have sliced or cubed your squash, I don't think it really matters as long as it's not pureed. They tell us not to can pureed squash like pumpkin or winter squash because it's just too dense to be able to process correctly. So let's go ahead and take our cubed squash, and we're just going to drop it down into our jars. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it in pint jars because that's plenty for just Dean and myself. But I took out 7 jars. I'm not sure how much it's going to take up, how much space it's going to take up, but we'll see. I may not need all 7 jars. reason why I roasted them and did not boil them, like the manual said, is because we have to remember that when these are in the pressure canner, it is being cooked. So I was afraid that if I boiled these and then put them in the pressure canner, they were going to get like mush. Plus, like I said, the main reason was I wasn't even going to attempt to peel a winter squash. Unless it had been roasted. Now I just have 4 little pieces left. So I'm just going to drop one in each jar. There we go, 4 jars. All right. I can put those away. I'm not going to put salt on these or anything because this is delicata squash. And while you can use it as a side for a dinner or in quinoa bowls or anything like that, you can also sweeten it and use it in a dessert as well. Now the directions had said to use boiling water. I'm going to use very hot water. I'm not going to use boiling water, but very hot water. And like I said, I'm using really hot water, but not boiling. And the reason that I'm not using boiling water is that when you're pressure canning, you want to keep everything relatively the same temperature or close to it. That goes for water bath canning as well. And the reason being is you don't want to put hot water into a cold jar. You don't want to put a cold jar down into hot water. So my water in the canner was not boiling that these jars were sitting in. So they were sitting in hot water. So I'm using hot water in them. Now I'm going to use this handy dandy tool. I'm going to just put it down in there in a couple places. Just make sure there's not any air trapped in there. I mean, I'm sure there's some, but it kind of helps it get it out. I canned potatoes yesterday, and this really kind of reminds me of that. Okay. And it wants 1 inch of headspace. This side of this tool, you put it in here on the side of your jar. Let this sit on the ledge of your jar, and then each will tell you 1/4, 1/2, 1 inch of headspace. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the bottom of this tool to touch the water. That one's a little much. That's good. That's a little much too. That one is too. So I have to take out some of this water. Now, before I had that little tool, I just went by the bands, the rings on the jar. And when you fill it up to the bottom right here, that's 1 inch of headspace. And then this line is 1/2 inch. And then this one way up here is 1/4 inch. But I have the tool now, so now I use it. So I need some water out of that one. This one's fine. Out of that one. Definitely out of that one. So I have just a regular spoon, and I'm going to take these over to the sink, the ones that needed some water taken out, and just take a tablespoon or so out and measure again. Now that I have all 4 jars to the correct water level, I'm just going to do an air pocket search one more time. And that's just me being a little bit much about it. And now that I see these, I'm glad that I didn't like boil them till they were soft, because they're already starting to soften in this hot water. I mean, they were already a little bit soft from roasting, but yeah. All right, so next step, I'm just going to take a piece of paper towel. I really put a decent amount of vinegar on mine, and I'm going to wipe these rims. You want to make sure there is nothing on your rims, because that can come between the seal and then your jar will not seal properly. And after the work you put in, you don't want that to happen. If you don't have a jar sealed properly, you're going to want to put it in the refrigerator right away and use it at your earliest convenience. Okay, now it's just time for bands and lids. And the first one is wide mouth. Fingertip tight means you don't put a lot of wrist action into it. And that's been a hard one for me, because usually I like to make sure something's really nice and sealed. But when everything starts to expand, it needs to have a little bit of room. Otherwise, your lids will buckle. And then you guessed it, they won't seal. I'm going to process these in the pressure canner with 15 pounds of pressure. That's just because it's for my altitude. Look in whatever book you're using, and it'll tell you for your altitude how many pounds of pressure you should use. I already have the water in the canner, so I'm just going to go ahead and put these in. They're not really hot, so I'm not going to use the jar lifter. So I'm going to get my lid and lock it on. Okay, so now that the lid is locked on, I've turned the heat up, and we'll just wait for the canner to start to vent steam. And friends, I can't stress enough about how important it is to be prepared. Not just when times get tough or when we think we see a little bit of a rough road ahead, but to stay prepared, and then that way we don't have to worry about it, because you never know when something could fall upon you in just a matter of moments. I mean, life changes in an instant. And I want to make sure that if something should go awry, that I know that there is food in our home, wood for our stove, and some other basic things to keep our homestead going. Okay, now as a rule of thumb, I like to wait until the vent lock is up before I start timing the steaming of the canner. This vent lock lets me know that pressure is building in the canner and steam is going to be coming out of the vent pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the timer for 10 minutes and let that steam for 10 minutes. Well, now the timer just went off, and as you can probably see, and maybe even hear, we are rolling now. So it has been venting for 10 minutes, so everything, excuse me, everything's clear. I'm going to go ahead and take my weighted gauge and place it over the steam pipe, the vent pipe. Okay, now I'm going to let the canner come to the appropriate amount of weight for my altitude. So I'm going to go ahead and let pressure continue to build until we reach 15 pounds, at which time I will start the timer and we will go ahead and process this squash for 55 minutes since it's pints. Now, I also wanted to just mention one little thing, because a lot of people are scared of pressure canning. I was too. I just had all these envisions of things blowing up and, you know, having a hole in my ceiling, or, you know, being struck down by a blowing up pot or jars. And I was even afraid to put the weight on the vent pipe, because steam is the worst kind of burn you can have, and there's plenty of steam coming up out of there. But really, it's not bad. At first, I was trying to put that weighted gauge on with an oven mitt. It doesn't work. And so I was like, Dean, will you do it? Because I was just too afraid. And he did it 1, 2, 3, no problem, just like I did. It's not a huge amount of heat like you would think with steam coming out. You can actually hold your hand over it, you know, higher up. I've done that before, just if I can't see the steam, like in the summertime. But don't be afraid to try. Never be afraid to try. The worst thing you can do is fail, and then you just try again. Okay, we are at the 15-pound pressure mark, actually a little bit beyond it. So I've turned my heat back just a little bit. And you can see that the weighted gauge is doing its little dance. So now I can go ahead and set the timer for 55 minutes. Okay, so the timer just went off. We have been pressure canning now for 55 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and just turn the stove off. I'm going to let the pressure come down naturally on its own. That's going to take quite a bit of time. So when this vent lock here drops down, indicating there's no more pressure in the canner, I will then lift up the weighted gauge and the lid and just let it sit for 5 minutes. Well, the jars are cooling, and I will go ahead and take care of them in the morning and take the bands off and rinse them off, wash them off a little bit, and label them and put them in the pantry. It is still the same day. I changed shirts. I had built a fire in the wood stove and got it cranking, and got it just a little bit too warm. So go ahead and give canning a try. It's a skill that is becoming a lost and forgotten to time, and it's definitely something that can benefit you no matter where you live, no matter your lifestyle. So thank you for joining me up here on Rugged Mountain Homestead today. We're always so glad when you do. I look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, take care.